Basically, yeah, as Tasha said a year ago, I came to her and I asked if I could speak on this topic because it's something I feel quite strongly about. I think there's been a lot of work over the last few years to reduce production times, and they've gone down quite significantly, but with most publishers, significant bottlenecks still remain at the correction stage. I mean, basically, an author sends their corrections and a publisher applies them and then sends them to the vendor who then applies them again. And this creates time and bottlenecks, and also there's significant margin for error. And it's pretty much a bit like Chinese whispers, getting the publisher to understand what the author wants and then getting the vendor to understand what the publisher thinks that the author wants. So as you can imagine, this can cause some issues. Web-based proof markup systems are looking to address that as well as many other issues. And this panel is looking at 3 different users, the author, the publisher, and the vendor. So we have David Eaton, and he is an experienced author who's published in many different journals and books. He's worked primarily with the PDF correction system, but has also got a little experience with web-proof markups, so he can give us an insight into that. Caroline Burley is Assistant Manager, Editorial Production at the Royal Society of Chemistry, and one of the journals that she oversees is RSC Advances, and that's been using TNQ's Proof Central system for over a year, and as of, I think, this week, has hit the 14,000 article mark. So, yeah, that's quite a significant number of articles through that system. And then Ravi Venkataramani is founder and CEO of Exeter Premedia. Is this picking me up? Okay. And he spent the last few years developing Kriya, which is a unified publishing solution that incorporates web-based proof markup amongst many other functions. And this has recently gone into live production with a couple of publishers. Just to get a feel for what people are actually doing in web-based proof markup, has anyone here is using it at the moment? Okay, not very many. And that's pretty much what I found when I was looking into this. It's surprising how few publishers and vendors are actually live with this. And to kick off, I'd like to ask Caroline, in lieu of that, why did you as a publisher get involved, and what have your experiences been like?
Is that on? Yes, great. Our main motivation actually was looking at modern tools for the author to use through the publishing process. So we didn't per se think we had a big problem with our more traditional PDF-based proofing process, although we were very aware that in terms of being an actual process, there's a lot of toing and froing of files between several locations, so it wasn't ideal. But what we were primarily concerned with was providing the author with a nice, easy-to-use system through the publishing process. So that's really what led us to start investigating these tools.
Okay. And Ravi, what led you to develop the system, and what's it been like with you, and particularly with your experience with other stakeholders?
Well, when we started building the system, one of the challenges that we were facing as a vendor is that, as I guess everybody is trying to do publications quicker and bring the costs down, and all of this, it became apparent to us that content was very important, which meant that people who work on the content, like our editors and reviewers or project managers, they need to have more control of the content, be able to drive the process a lot better, and at the end of the day, make the experience better for the publisher as well as the author. So in doing that, we decided that the best way to handle it was to come up with a system was first going to be developed for us in terms of making web-based proof markup easy, making the ability to edit content online, to make proofs online, and thereby giving a similar experience to the authors now, where they have more control. They can direct the publication the way they want, making sure the metadata is correct, making sure they have the right citations in there, making sure their images are up to the mark. And end of the day, them being the originator of the publication, signing off on this publication, saying this is this is what I want. And that was the dream that we started off with, and I think what we've done over the years is to really collaborate with all of our customers, be it publishers in the journals market, like Informa and BMJ, but also on the book side with Springer and many others, to bring in many of the features that the authors have been asking for, what the publishers have been looking for, and bringing it all onto one system.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. And David, as an author, you've got a very different viewpoint to all of this. What have you found your experience has been like?
Thank you, Petra, and thank you for having me along. It's very interesting to see the other side of the fence. I guess as an author, production and publication is the end of quite a long journey. So I might have done some research, which has taken several months, written it up, send it off to a journal. That's taken a few more months to go through some revisions. So by the time I get to the proof stage, sometimes it is a little tricky to remember exactly what the work was. You're sort of trying to remind yourself, which one was this? And what I did this 18 months ago, and okay, is it over yet? Right. So I think for me, the proofing stage is an important one, partly because I'm quite a pedant and I like to go through in great detail, but it also marks the realization of the work that you've been doing. So when you see it in the journal format, it is quite exciting. And you think, right, this is going to be out there and I can soon kind of share this with people. So I think in terms of a proofing solution, there's definitely an emphasis on something which is easy to use, which is quick. I don't want to be spending hours kind of faffing around with something. I want to, ideally, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, go through it, looks all fine. And I guess a lot of authors would be quite similar. They want something which is going to make their lives easier, but also demonstrate that it produces a high-quality product at the end of the day.
Okay. So with all your experience, I'll probably direct this to Ravi and Caroline. What key learning points have you taken away from this with the setup, the implementation?
So one of the things, when we started off this process, it seemed like, okay, we could build a solution that would be a one-size-fits-all, and that every publication is a publication, so it should have similar things. But as we went through this process, we've noticed that every publisher, be big or small, have very defined workflows, ways in which they do things, ways they collaborate with authors on, and that is very important that we maintain that. And I think that was one of the learnings that we had, was to not stick to one particular way of doing things, but give the publishers and the authors the flexibility to drive that experience, decide how they would like to interact, what features they would want, as well as databases that they would want to integrate with. I think as we work with eLife Sciences, we find that there's quite a few databases that they want to connect to, and this list changes from publisher to publisher. So in building a system, it's very important to think of such connects and try and fit in within the existing workflows, because the last thing that people want to do is to change their whole systems to adapt to a new software. It would be best for the systems to adapt to the publisher's workflows.
Okay, thanks, Ravi.
I think from our perspective, a key learning point before we even got to the implementation stage was understanding what our authors would want from such a tool. So in terms of investigating what solutions were out there, it became very clear to us that there is a trade-off between the simplicity of the tool and how easy it is for an author to use versus the functionality within a tool. As a publisher, it's very tempting to think you need a tool that's going to do absolutely everything for you with all the bells and whistles in terms of being able to edit figures and add new content to the XML. But actually, when we went back and did an investigation of the actual proof corrections that our authors were submitting to us, we realised that in the vast majority of cases, these corrections were very, what I'd call, simple edits to existing content, and therefore, for us, the best solution for our authors was to pick the tool where the author interface was as intuitive as possible, and not actually to worry about quite how complex the corrections that the authors could carry out within the tool would be.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Taking that in mind, David, what do you think? What one thing would make these kind of systems better for you as an author, or what, as an author, do you want to see in this kind of system?
I think I agree with Caroline's point about simplicity, and I look back through some of the articles that I've done proofs on in the last year or two, and most of them were very minor changes. So it's the odd word here, it's the odd little symbol. I suppose it needs the functionality to be able to edit more than just alphanumeric letters. So you might have mathematical expressions or things which need minor corrections to make them correct rather than just a stylistic thing. And there is occasionally, just from a look point of view, I find that figures and tables can be put in a certain format that you want to feed back on. So I guess the question is, do you have a system which allows the author to do that directly, or just to feed that back to the person that's done the layout in the first place?
Cool. So what do you think the biggest benefit of the system is? Anyone?
To authors, to
For-
publishers.
I think for each of you in your different roles.
To us, one of the biggest benefits is that our authors really like using it. In fact, we're quite surprised by how well they like using it. We ran a survey alongside the system when we launched it, and actually 98% of the authors who used the system rated it as easy or very easy to use and would like to use it again. So we were quite shocked that we would get such positive feedback so quickly. An additional benefit that it's had to us as publishers is that it has sped up the production time quite significantly. We had expected that a system in which the corrections have effectively already been made by the author and just need some level of acceptance on the part of the editorial staff would speed things up, and it has done. We also found that the elimination of what we call the kind of dead time, whereby proof corrections would have come into us by email and would sit in an inbox waiting for somebody to file them and log them onto the system. So that elimination of the dead time whilst the paper's not being worked on has sped things up as well. But I think what we hadn't anticipated so much was how it would actually make the time it takes for the author to supply their corrections to us faster. We thought our authors were pretty quick at that already. On average, it took an author about 3 days to set from when they receive their proofs to returning their corrections to us. But since we've started using Proof Central on RSC Advances, that time's fallen to just over 24 hours. So that has made quite a significant dent in our production times.
The biggest benefit we've seen is the quality of the publications has gone up significantly, because what's happened is in these systems you're now able to expose all different parts of the manuscript, be it the content, be it the metadata as far as the ORCIDs and the funders and all of that. In addition, supplementary files, source code. So you're now able to examine the different parts of your publication, make sure it's all accurate, and meanwhile not worry so much about, is my XML going to be correct, is my PDF going to be correct, because those things are what these systems are taking care of. Instead, it allows people to focus on the content, and everybody in the cycle, be it the vendor, be it the author or the publisher, all focus on that one essential piece, which is what Leighton and Sarah and everybody else has been talking about today, is focusing on the quality of the content and improving that quality, and that's what these systems are able to do now.
David, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think just that if you can build up confidence, like people know a certain platform and they know that it's quick and easy to use, then they probably will respond quicker. I guess with all of us, when we see an email, we probably either respond to it immediately or we put it in that sort of pile of, oh, I'll get back to that in the next few days. So what you want is for that to be actioned now in the next 5 minutes, and then the person moves on to something else, rather than, yeah, I'll get around to that just before the deadline, which is probably in about 3 days' time. And maybe that's the difference that you've seen.
Okay, so the benefits seem pretty self-evident. So why do you think other publishers, vendors aren't using these systems? And do you think there's anything that's preventing them? And also David, I'd also like you to touch on if there's anything that would prevent authors from using these systems as well.
I think one of the challenges that publishers are looking at is they're worried about how authors will accept these systems, because the authors are used to working a certain way and it's been working well, so why fix something that's not broken? And I think what we've seen in our testing with various publishers on our system is that authors have been finding it quite easy, because I think pretty much everybody today uses some sort of social media utility like Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. So they're very comfortable making edits online, typing things online. that any sort of online interface, web-based interface, is something that the authors are taking to quite well. In fact, in all of our experiences, we've found authors making changes quite easily, in fact, and going one step further, saying, I want to move my images around on my proof. How can I do that? So they're now starting to stretch the limits of what these systems can do and starting to ask for the next big thing.
When we were first investigating these systems, we were quite hesitant in terms of how we thought our authors would take to them, whether they'd actually want to use them or whether they would feel that we were pushing more work back onto them. We did actually survey our editorial board members during that process, just to see how they would feel about using these systems, but they weren't familiar with them. I hadn't really used them, so we didn't get much feedback. So that was part of the reason why we ran a survey alongside the system when we launched it. And actually, we didn't receive any feedback through that survey at all from authors that was negative in terms of us making the author work harder. In contrary, they actually said to us that they felt like they had more control of the process and felt like they could be rest assured that their corrections were going to be carried out more accurately. So that had a real benefit as well.
I guess there's kind of a challenge in that. So as an author, I pick a journal based on a lot of different factors, but mainly on the impact of that journal. So there are two journals in medical physics that are clearly the global leaders, and so if I have a piece of work, I'm going to try and submit it to one of those. And in some ways, it doesn't really matter what the proofing system is. That's a small consideration in terms of me wanting to submit to that journal. But I suppose on the other hand, if that system is dreadful and all my colleagues say it's dreadful, then that is going to affect my decision. It's the whole package, I suppose, isn't it? That you're attracted to a particular journal, but if that publisher has a good or a bad reputation for all the different stages of the process, that is going to factor into your decision, I think.
Okay, so just expanding on that a bit, then if you get a system where you have the option to either use the system or download PDF and go with that, which I know RSC Advances does, what would prevent an author using the system and going to the PDF option?
Probably just because they're a bit stuck in their ways. I don't know if you do some kind of analysis based on age or something. Obviously, that I didn't say that, but certain people become used to a certain system, and yeah, I guess they like to stick with what they know. But if you can sell the benefits of a different system, and they hear from other colleagues, I guess what you want is someone in a scientific conference saying, "Oh, do you hear about this new system? It's great. I've used it, and it's fantastic." And then they bear that in mind when they're submitting to a completely different journal that uses the same vendor. Then it spreads by advertising, by word of mouth.
Okay. So Caroline, what is the take-up with authors with the system as opposed to using PDF?
So as you mentioned, Petra, we don't force our authors to use the system. They have to retrieve their proofs through Proof Central, but in terms of how they submit their corrections back to us, they can either use the HTML interface, or they can download the PDF, they can annotate it, and then they can upload it to Proof Central and submit it back to us, or they can just take the PDF and send it back to us via an email via our traditional proofing methods. So without any real pushing or promotion from our side, our current uptake of the HTML interface is 86% of authors. A further 7% annotate the PDF and send it back to us through Proof Central. So that means that actually 93% of our authors on that journal are using Proof Central, and the remaining 7% are sending those corrections back to us by email. We actually asked those authors why they were doing it that way. The majority of authors who were annotating the PDF and sending it back via Proof Central simply said, "I prefer to annotate a PDF. It's not that the tool doesn't let me do what I want to do, I just like to annotate the PDF." But a high proportion of them said, "Well, I might try the HTML interface next time." Of the authors who continued to send their corrections back to us by email, the responses were a bit more varied, but by and large it simply fell back to either I wasn't aware of the system that I just logged into, or simply that they felt that email was just a more familiar and safer method of providing their corrections to us. So I think, as you say, it's largely familiarity and what people are comfortable with using.
Okay, thank you. So just thinking about engagement, so how does this affect user engagement? Because I would imagine the users are spending quite a lot of time on the systems, and in some cases maybe more than they actually spend on the final platform.
Don't know exactly how long they're taking, but they're returning their proof corrections to us much quicker, and our record is within 12 minutes of receiving their proof, so I don't think it takes them too long.
So Ravi, is that something that you've experienced? Any experience in?
Well, it's still early days. We went live with eLife and BIR just a few weeks ago. So what we're finding is authors are taking to the system quite well. They're returning their corrections. They're having no difficulty in making the corrections. I think in all, it's been an excellent experience. People are enjoying it.
Okay. So where else in the production life cycle do you think this would be of benefit, this kind of system?
I think, there's definitely potential to extending this all the way to the first time the author interacts with the system, is to see how current peer review systems could take that author's manuscript and present it in a way by which it's structured, it's more ready for review in terms of a markup, rather than have a separate thread of email or documents being exchanged back and forth. If the systems could expand in that direction, I think that would be a real benefit.
Yeah, like I said, I had a few chats just in the break with people that kind of, as a scientist, okay, part of me wants to kind of have a nice kind of layout and format, but part of me wants to spend most of my time on the science and not on getting the right headings and getting the formatting. And especially, I will confess, I have had some things rejected from a number of journals, and then you have to, you choose to send it somewhere else, and you have to change the format slightly, and that can take up more time. So if you had a system where you were putting the content together, and then right from the start it was in the cloud somewhere, and then it puts it in the right format, puts it off to this journal, and woe betide, it comes back again. You then have a similar platform that you can reformat it for a different journal and send it off again. I think that would be very attractive, because that would cut down the author time in the whole process. I think most people expect to go through a few rejections in life. And yeah, you will have to kind of go between different publishers potentially, or between different platforms. So to get it sort of out there and then in the system, I think would be really useful.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with what both Ravi and David said, and particularly I think in the peer review system, the fact that authors are so quick to return their corrections to us, and that so many of them are quite comfortable using these systems, leads us to think that it could potentially have the same effect in terms of reviewers and being able to annotate and add their comments in the paper in that way. A challenge there for a publisher such as ourselves, we reject 60% of the submissions to us. So that provides a challenge in terms of having to structure the paper if you're then going to end up rejecting it. But as technologies move forward and can do that in a more automated fashion, I can definitely see there being a significant benefit in terms of getting the paper in a more structured format at the beginning of the process, and then using these sorts of tools on the paper right through the process.
Okay. And Ravi, I know that you're looking at collaboration between different publishers, so can you tell us a bit more about that?
So when we started off on this process, we were very keen on building something that would make sense. I think very often we fall into the trap of building systems that make sense for you, work in your organization, and when it comes out and everybody else sees it, they say, hey, this doesn't work. So that was something we started off early, which was to work in a prototype mode and build prototypes and then showcase it to A, our customers, and B, also our prospects. So I've had several discussions with publishers and authors even about these systems and how they would like to see it. We've been very open about taking those suggestions in, and I think that's very key. As you see this new world where this technology is increasingly disrupting, it's very important to take note of all the new technologies that are coming through. I think the entire audience is exposed to all these technologies. So in some ways, they do give you a great insight into what could make the system better. So as long as you have your eyes and ears open, I think that would be the way to develop really good systems.
Anyone anything to add on that? No. Okay, looking at scalability, that's Caroline, you're using RC, you're working on RC advances, and that's grown massively over the last year. I mean, how's that affected your processes on Proof Central?
Well, as you mentioned, Petra, as of this weekend, our 14,000 article went through Proof Central, so that's 14,000 proofs we haven't had to manually correct. That's
fantastic.
Quite helpful on scalability.
But as a system, being able to...
Yeah, so that's important. Obviously, when we were selecting what tool to use, we were really looking for something that was proven in terms of its reliability. And therefore it had to be something that was proven to be able to cope with the volume of papers that we were expecting to receive. So it's certainly proven itself since we've been using it over the past year.
And Ravi, have you done any work on that?
Well, we've had, several hundred articles go through the system. Currently, we only launched the system in the middle of November, so it's the early days yet. But so far it's promising. We have not only journal publishers being interested, but a lot of book publishers. And I think in some ways there probably is more advantages to be gained in the book world for the reason that, when you work with contributed volume, several authors participating in the process, there's a greater need for collaboration. There's also a need for tools to allow for collation. So you think about all the different aspects that make the publication of a book be a longer process. How could you then take the lessons learned from the journals world and apply it to the books world? It's something that we're taking a lot of interest in, and I think our book publishers are also eager to get on the platform, and that's something that's happening as we speak. I think that's where the real gains are going to be seen, even more than the journals world in some ways, because journals is quite methodical, is a standard process, but the books world tends to be a lot more custom and a lot more challenges that come up.
And just thinking of the whole development cycle of this, is there anything that you would basically go back and do again or regret having done? Yes.
We might use it sooner. No, in all honesty, no, we found the process actually very simple. I think, if anything, we were quite hesitant to begin with. We expected to receive at least some amount of negative feedback from our authors. Our authors are generally not quiet to give us feedback, so we've been very pleasantly surprised with quite how happy they are with it. We've been very happy with how reliable the system has been, and we wouldn't do anything different in that respect.
As far as what we would change, I think we would, something we've already done, but more importantly, integrations with external systems. There's a lot of different databases that are coming up. There's new tools that are being available to the researchers to be able to integrate with those easily. So rather than go custom develop similar solutions, is to make it easy for other systems to talk to us. I think at that point, you're giving a better experience for the author, a better experience for the publisher.
Okay, thanks. And David, as an author, how easy do you find these systems to use, and how easy do you think other authors will find them?
I think they can be easy to use. As I say, I haven't had vast experience with the online platforms yet, but I look forward to more and more. I guess this is going to be a growing area. And I think people will use, to an extent, will use the system that you ask them to use. Because by the time they've got that far in the process, they don't really have any choice. But then that feedback is going to get to them next time. So this is a direction the industry is heading. I think it's going to head in that direction. I do like the idea of the reviewing, though. So I do quite a lot of reviews, and you have the article and you have your text file next to it, and you say line 641, change this. It'd be nice if you could actually tag that to the part of the document, like you do when you're actually co-authoring something. You go through and you put loads of comments, and it's actually tied to the particular location. I think that would be really neat.
Okay. So going back to you then, Caroline, do you have any plans to actually stop offering authors a choice?
No, not immediate plans to stop offering them a choice, because a big part of what we do is about catering to our different authors' needs and not forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. We haven't really put a great deal of effort into really pushing it to them. This is sort of what we've seen has been a more natural tendency of our authors, so we do have plans to look at that and what we can do to make it easier and more persuade them to use it rather than force them to use it.
Okay, I've got one final question before we break for one final question before we break for audience questions. There's been a lot of discussion about the dominance of PDF, good or bad, and these systems sort of aren't tied to that, and an author could technically go throughout the whole production process without even seeing a PDF. What implications do you think this has for the format and the publishing workflow?
That's a really good question, Petra. I think the PDF for the longest time has been a great format because of its portability, that pretty much anybody can download the reader for free and view the document. But the PDF is lacking in terms of the ability to show lots of different pieces of content, for example, videos and supplementary files and other things that you want to package in, but the size of the PDF and the fact that you want to transport it becomes more of key. Now with browsers increasingly becoming more and more capable, feature-rich, and a lot of plugins now available on either Chrome or Firefox, you now have the option to present your entire publication on the web, much like eLife is promoting with their Lens product, where now the reading experience is the focus, where in case you're reading the content, to be able to view the images or the videos just by the side of it, to play videos in place, to the point that I think there is going to be a time where the PDF will be an option rather than the prime output. But I think from studies that eLife has done, it's some years away, but it's definitely on the way.
I would love that were the case, but our authors love the PDF. I think we really need to give them a better alternative before they're going to move away from the PDF. Our authors are very happy to use an HTML interface, but they want to see the PDF still during that process. So I think, sorry Yakov, but the PDF is here to stay for a while longer.
David, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting how monopolies kind of rise and fall, isn't it? So sort of 10 or 15 years ago, everyone was using Internet Explorer, and that was pretty much the only browser on the world. And then now there's 5, 6, 7, 50 probably. So I don't know whether the same thing will happen to portable document formats, or maybe Google will just take over all of them. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, something looks like people like familiarity. Everybody uses email. We've tried in our group to get people to use online kind of web-based forums to discuss things, and they just don't because they love sending emails to each other. But I think there are examples of how things can change, and as you say, if there's products which are giving the same functionality or better functionality, I think scientists and people working in technology are maybe more likely to embrace those because they have a but they have a technical background, but they also, if they're publishing, they also presumably have a kind of inherent innovative side to them as well. So potentially the sort of customers you're dealing with are maybe more likely than the average member of the public to try out new things and to embrace new technologies.
Thank you. Anything else anyone wants to add? Great. Thank you.
Better? Yay. So thank you to the panel. I'm going to start with Hendrik.
Hello, yeah, I'm Hendrik Wittkopf from Sage Publications. I was just wondering, how often did you release different versions? And the other question is, how long did it take from proof of concept to then going live?
So as far as releases, I think you'll find that in a web-based world, the releases happen a lot more frequently because when it comes to releasing stuff for different systems, you already know your user base as far as what browsers they're using, what operating systems they're using, so it's quite easy to do that test. So what we predict is the releases will happen once a quarter, if not more often. But once a quarter, I think would be at most a minimum, only because of the extent of requests that do come in and the things that could be done to make the system better. But to answer your second question, as far as going from proof of concept, it really depends. I think as we built the proof of concept, I would say honestly, 2 years ago when we started the work, we didn't know what the final product was going to be. We started off as a prototype just to look at how people tag their references and bring in citations and all of that. And as we started developing on it, we started to see a bigger vision for it in terms of not just being a author-proof markup. So the way we are selling our system is not as an author-proof markup, but really a way to run your whole publications online. So be it the copy editing, be it the typesetting, be it the author review, publisher review, all of it happens on an online system, at which point you don't have any, you have only one single source of data, all content gets changed over there, all changes happen over there, and at the end of the day you get your PDF, you get your XML, and so it's a very smooth system, streamlined system.
Hi, Phil Ryman at Taylor & Francis. The panel definitely picked up on one major fear that we had when we were implementing this, and that basically authors just wouldn't like it. But the other fear was actually the exact opposite, that they would like it too much, and there'd be the temptation to just start rewriting their article, and therefore undermining the peer review process. So I just wonder whether you had the same thoughts and how you mitigated that.
Yeah, we have an editorial process in place, so an author makes their corrections, but there is a process of acceptance of those corrections according to our editorial criteria before they go into the main paper. We haven't seen any kind of misuse of that. I actually think in some respects authors have toned down the number of corrections they're making, and they do what is strictly necessary, but don't necessarily try to implement all the frills that they might have done more traditionally. So I think it has made it quicker and easier for them.
The one that you're using doesn't allow for free-flowing editing.
Yes, so within the system we can put some limits in place in terms of how significant the change is. So we can, for instance, ensure that authors can't substantially change the author list during that process. They can't add pages of extra text. But we do also have just a simple checking mechanism in place on accepting those corrections, that there's nothing, they haven't changed the results that are significant to the paper and were the reason why it was accepted in the first place.
Hi, a couple of quick questions. You talked about the fact that you use this methodology for RSC advances, but have you thought about expanding that out to your other journals? And if yes or no, why not? And then you also talked a lot about speeding up publication times. So I'm wondering if, I don't know what your normal workflow is, but do your production editors normally vet author corrections? And do they do this with this product? We don't, at AIP Publishing, we don't use this methodology, but one of the things that we've talked about is, our production editors would still need to vet the author corrections, follow up if there's a author query that hasn't been responded to for whatever reason. So, there's been some, we're not sure about how much time we actually will save. So I'm not sure if your production editors still go through those corrections and vet them, even in this methodology.
So to take those in turns, one of the benefits of a system is that the author cannot finally submit their corrections without having responded to the queries. So we don't need to go back and chase them, or at least definitely not as much as we did before. So there's a definite saving there. In terms of the vetting process, actually what we did here is we trained staff at T&Q to do that for us. We do that on a number of our other titles already with other vendors that we use, just not using a tool as well. And we found that something that's been relatively easy to implement and train our vendors to do as well. So that hasn't caused us any issues. In terms of our normal proofing process, so yes, either our in-house editors or our vendors, depending on what the product is, would exert some editorial control over those corrections. But what the difference with this tool here is that they're not then having to implement the corrections that they accept. They're already made within the system, and it's simply a case of accepting or rejecting them. What we then do is make sure they adhere to our style and things like that. So that's an additional level of work that we do. And then finally, to answer your question about rolling it out, we're undergoing a review of the success of the project at the moment. And I think it's highly likely that we will look to roll out a system or a system like this on our other titles. We're just presently looking, actually we're doing a review of our production processes and systems at the moment, which just means that any additional development work to integrate our systems is on hold until after that process. So that's a bit of a watch this space, but it's bound to happen.
Ken Ross and IEEE. In these systems, are authors able to edit their equations online and make corrections to math? And if so, how does that work?
Very good question. Yes, I think that's an integral piece of all these systems, giving the ability to the authors to make corrections to math. The way typically systems do, they integrate with vendors like Virus is a good example, where they would display the equation in much like math type, where the authors can go make those changes right in that, and when it saves it as a MathML as well as the image for the equation. So the author gets to control that. Not only can you have the author make changes, you can also track those changes. So it goes one step further, and unlike before where the author would mark up a PDF and say these are the symbols I would like changed, the author makes the changes and the publisher is also aware that the author has made those changes.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Michael Cunningham from Portland Press. Have you given any consideration to introducing the web-based interface at the almost immediate previous stage to proofing at copy editing?
Yes, but we're not going to do that. Our motivation here is the author and their experience rather than any kind of internal needs to do that. When we edit papers in-house, our staff use the XML. It's already been created at that point. We don't currently see that there would be an additional benefit to us because of how our processes currently work of using these tools. There are, however, benefits in terms of, particularly I think if you use a lot of off-site staff to do editing, then these tools can be really beneficial in that sense.
Hi, I'm Kaveh from River Valley. I've got a few comments, really. I'll try and keep them short. Regarding PDF, there's something, I used to hate the PDF, now I love the PDF. And I realize there's a reason for it, because we think of things as where they are. Our brains remember, for example, you have your key in the left-hand side of your drawer, and as it moves around, you forget where it is. You seem to remember a figure was at the top of a page, and the PDF is static, it stays there, and you tend to remember that. That's one reason for having a PDF. Now, of course, some people like PDF, some people don't, but we should give the choice. And with a good system, we can have an XML, say in the cloud. You want the PDF, and it'll produce the PDF for you on the fly. In fact, it can produce it black and white or color, with videos embedded, without videos embedded. So that's one comment. And if I may, another comment. This is great that we are doing web-based proof markup, but it's a tiny part of the whole publishing process. The whole thing, it still really hasn't changed for decades, I feel. And David, our author, alluded to the possibility of authoring in a way that you don't have to read these tortuous, tedious author instructions as to where to put the comma and the semicolon. So let's modernize the whole of publishing, not just this tiny bit, which is commendable. I hope that's not too negative, but you should know me by now.
If I can summarize, I think that the question is, how can we make this tool go a lot further and cover more than the proof markup and really help to address some of the other pain points in the publishing system, which I think you guys touched on a little earlier about pulling back, through the peer review process. Do you have any actual intentions to start working on that at the moment?
Well, yes, we are actively working on a process to take our product all the way on to submission stage. We do recognize that it is a monumental task. We do recognize that it's going to take some time to do it right. But in this, we are building a consortium of publishers who are interested in this process, who want to participate. And that's something that has been really heartening for us, is the amount of interest we're getting from publishers in participating in the process, in building a system together. And that's been really great, because I think that's what's made our product really good at the end of the day.
Okay. So we don't have time for any more questions. Thank you hugely to our panel. And I'm going to hand over to Janine, who's introducing our next speaker.